Tonight, the East is baking. Millions swelter in what could be the worst week of the summer. Elaine Quijano asked the power companies whether they can keep up. Chip Reed on a city losing its water at the worst time. Carter Evans is in Los Angeles, where violence broke out in response to the Zimmerman verdict. The Attorney General calls Florida's Stand Your Ground law senseless. Michelle Miller reports. Nuclear contamination is a surprise discovery on a U.S. military base. Anna Werner is there. And Dean Reynolds visits a tough neighborhood.
Encouragement. You know, when you hear something like that, I mean, you stop. You know, it's like, okay.
Where a rusty old van carries children to a brighter future.
These children are bright, they're witty, and all they need is a chance.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. America today was one nation under a blazing sun. Just have a look at the map. Red hot temperatures from coast to coast. It is darkest red where the mercury reached into the 90s. And on the East Coast, the high today in New York and Boston hit 93. Washington, 95. Baltimore, 96. The National Weather Service put out a heat alert that stretches from New York to Boston. 3 straight days of 90-plus temperatures in New York makes it an official heat wave, but still far from the record 12 straight days back in 1953. The heat is sending the demand for power and water through the roof. We have 2 reports. First, Elaine Quijano in New York. Elaine?
Scott, the oppressive humidity means there's little relief even when the sun goes down. That keeps demand for power high well into the evening hours.
The temperature felt like 104 degrees above ground. And below ground, where we found Tyrone Barnett, it wasn't much better.
The heat, there's no way to escape it. It's just there, and you got to deal with it. You got to tough through it.
The city's largest power company, Consolidated Edison, has activated its emergency command center to handle what could be record-breaking demand for power.
So we're all on 12-hour shifts around the clock through the weekend to make sure that whatever comes our way we can deal with.
John Mixit is in charge here, where electricity is constantly monitored. He estimates nearly 6 million air conditioners are running at full power.
Have we broken any records yet?
We have not broken any records, but later in the week we're expecting to.
In terms of demand?
Yes, all-time record demand in our history, something like 13,200 megawatts. Sometime probably 5 o'clock on Thursday.
Con Ed has already arranged for power to be supplied from upstate New York or New Jersey if needed. Across the Northeast, other utilities have made their own arrangements to meet demand, including asking customers to conserve electricity.
Good right now, but we're certainly got our eye out for the rest of the week.
Con Ed spent $500 million making repairs after Superstorm Sandy last fall. That work was just completed in June. Scott, this heat wave is the first real test of those repairs.
Thanks, Elaine. And the heat wave is expected to continue until a cold front moves in on Friday, but that is likely to bring severe thunderstorms. In the middle of this swelter, there is a major shortage of water in suburban Washington. A water main in Prince George's County, Maryland, is being shut down for repairs for 3 to 5 days, and as many as 200,000 people could be affected. Chip Reed is there. Chip?
Well, good evening, Scott. A lot of people in this area are deeply unhappy that this work is being done and their water is being cut off when the temperature is in the 90s. But the people doing the work say it's got to be done now because that old pipe is so fragile and the water pressure is so high that it could explode like a bomb at any moment. Sandra Maith braved the heat to stock up on water today, but she came up empty. Every bottle had been snapped up, and that has her worried. So sometime tomorrow, that is going to stop.
It's going to stop.
The tap will run dry for 3 to 5 days as crews work to repair the massive 4.5-foot water main. Maith and her 79-year-old father, Luther, who's had problems with his kidneys and multiple bouts with cancer, are storing water everywhere they can. Your biggest concern is this guy.
That this guy here gets enough water, because he drinks plenty of water,
Right.
at least 7 bottles a day. and he has to have it for health reasons.
Fire officials are making contingency plans, Scott. They're bringing in additional water tankers from other jurisdictions. They're even identifying swimming pools in the area for use in case of emergencies.
Chip, thank you. The West is still bone dry, ideal conditions for wildfires. This one broke out yesterday in the mountains west of Palm Springs. Within hours, it doubled in size to about 8,000 acres. 50 homes have been evacuated. 650 firefighters are battling the fire. It is about 10% contained. Today, a sharp difference of opinion on the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin reverberated from coast to coast. In Florida, the U.S. Attorney General was sharply critical of state self-defense laws, and in Los Angeles, there was violence last night after a street demonstration. We'll start with Carter Evans in L.A.
Los Angeles Police Chief Charlie Beck made it clear there will not be a repeat of last night's mayhem.
Those of you that were here last night and came for the wrong reasons, if you come here again tonight, you will go to jail.
The rally was peaceful until 150 people broke away from the crowd, swarmed cars, shattered business windows, and broke into a Walmart.
Protesters there throwing some carts, it looks like.
At least 2 hours passed before police were ordered to intervene, but not before several people were injured in fights, including a television cameraman for affiliate KCBS in Los Angeles. He was attacked from behind. In Oakland, protesters blocked rush hour traffic on Interstate 880. It took officers in riot gear about a half hour to clear the road.
Time to go, you're being placed under arrest.
LA Chief Beck says he's putting at least 350 officers on the streets for any protests tonight. Scott, city leaders are calling for calm tonight. Volunteer community peace monitors will be out on the streets. They'll be here to help ease tension with police and keep order.
Hoping for a better night. Carter, thank you very much. The jurors in the Zimmerman trial were told by the judge that they could consider Florida's so-called stand your ground law. Similar laws are in effect in 26 states. Essentially, they say that a person who is threatened does not have to retreat. He can stand his ground and fight back. But in Florida today, the U.S. Attorney General took on this trend, and Michelle Miller was there to hear him. Michelle?
Scott, Attorney General Eric Holder addressed the NAACP at its national convention here in Orlando. And it's here that he first publicly criticized those stand your ground laws.
It's time to question laws that senselessly expand the concept of self-defense and sow dangerous conflict in our neighborhoods. These laws try to fix something that was never broken by allowing and perhaps encouraging violent situations to escalate in public. Such laws undermine public safety.
He also acknowledged something deeply personal, that even as the sitting Attorney General, he felt the need to have the same talk about being a black male in America with his 15-year-old son that his father had with him. That conversation explains how to act in public or in the presence of police.
This was a father-son tradition I hoped would not need to be handed down. But as a father who loves his son and who is more knowing in the ways of the world, I had to do this to protect my boy.
And the president of the NAACP is asking the Attorney General to file civil rights charges against George Zimmerman. And Scott, we should note that he has collected more than 1 million signatures online to support his call.
Michelle, thank you. But to win a civil rights case, federal prosecutors would have to prove that Zimmerman was motivated by racial bias. We learned what the jury thought of the race question when a juror spoke anonymously with CNN's Anderson Cooper.
Do you think race played a role in his decision, his view of Trayvon Martin as suspicious?
I don't think he did. I think just circumstances caused George to think that he might be a robber or trying to do something bad in the neighborhood.
Why do you think George Zimmerman found Trayvon Martin suspicious then?
Because he was cutting through the back. It was raining. He said he was looking in houses as he was walking down the road, and George had said that he didn't recognize who he was.
Did you take an initial vote to see where everybody was?
We did.
So where was everybody? How was that first vote?
We had 3 not guilties, 1 second-degree murder, and 2 manslaughters.
So half the jury felt he was not guilty, 2 manslaughters and 1 second degree.
Exactly.
Can you say do you want to say where you were on that?
I was not guilty. There was a couple of them in there that wanted to find him guilty of something. And after hours and hours and hours of deliberating over the law and reading it over and over and over again, we decided there's just no other place to go.
Because of the 2 options you had, second-degree murder or manslaughter, you felt neither applied.
Right. Well, because of the heat of the moment and the stand your ground. Then he had a right to defend himself. If he felt threatened that his life was going to be taken away from him or he was going to have bodily harm, he had a right.
The juror also told Cooper that the 6 women on the jury deliberated about 16 hours and were driven to tears by the stress of it as they reached their verdict. In Washington today, Senate Democrats and Republicans reached agreement to avert what one member called political Armageddon. The Republican minority agreed to stop blocking confirmation of key presidential nominations, and the Democratic majority withdrew the threat to change Senate rules and strip the minority of its power to filibuster those nominations. North Korea seems to have been caught red-handed trying to smuggle parts of a weapons system from Cuba through the Panama Canal. Panama's military seized that cargo yesterday, and David Martin tells us what was on the ship.
U.S. intelligence had been tracking the ship since last week when it left Cuba to transit the Panama Canal en route to North Korea. When canal authorities stopped and searched the vessel, they found hidden beneath a cargo of sugar what Panama's president called sophisticated missile equipment. That would be a clear-cut violation of UN sanctions against North Korea. According to Panama's president, the ship's captain was so upset at being caught that he tried to commit suicide. Sources said the equipment was part of a Russian-made anti-aircraft missile system known as the SA-2, which was first fielded in the late 1950s. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was Fidel Castro's chief military backer in his standoff with the United States. And sources say the Soviets provided the SA-2 to Cuba years ago, and that Cuba was now transferring it to North Korea. Just last month, one of North Korea's top generals paid a state visit to Cuba, which is one of the North's few remaining allies in the world. Whether the aborted shipment of missiles disguised as sugar was a result of that visit is unclear. Because this is such an old missile system, it was probably no longer in good condition, and Cuba was sending it to North Korea to be overhauled.
David Martin at the Pentagon for us. David, thank you very much. Nuclear contamination is a surprise discovery at a U.S. Army post. A power company faces a record penalty for this deadly pipeline blast, and there's a surprise double celebration at the Atlanta Zoo when the CBS Evening News continues. The U.S. Army said today that radiation has been detected at a former nuclear weapons bunker at Fort Bliss in Texas. The levels are low, but it raises questions about the safety of those who've worked there. Anna Werner is at Fort Bliss.
It was an Air Force retiree who called the military to warn them there might be radioactive material in and under this bunker. It was used for maintenance of nuclear weapons in the 1950s and 60s. Army tests detected low levels of radiation. Officials do not think it's a threat to a neighborhood a mile and a half away, but they are not sure about the 30 people who have been working here regularly. Army Major Joe Bacino.
We store machine guns, rifles, various equipment, training devices for National Guard, and service members have been going in and out of there to get this equipment since 2003.
The most recent report from Congress's investigative arm said Defense Department activities contaminated soil and water with chemicals ranging from solvents to nerve agents at more than 31,000 sites. 21,000 of those areas are on active military installations. The worry at Fort Bliss is that soldiers or employees may have ingested radioactive particles, possibly from special paint used on the bunker floor. It's been worn down over the years.
Who are the people who potentially could have been exposed to radiation here?
Anyone that went in the bunker, and also potentially anyone that came in contact that used those weapons. We think that anyone that handled those weapons is safe.
But investigators say it will take months to determine how many people may have been exposed to radiation. Anna Werner, CBS News, Fort Bliss, Texas.
We learn more today about the capture of one of Mexico's most wanted drug lords. Mexican Marines caught Miguel Trevino Morales before dawn yesterday in Nuevo Laredo, just across the border from Texas. He was traveling with his bodyguard, his accountant, and $2 million in cash. Trevino Morales is head of Los Zetas, a cartel known for beheading its enemies. We now know what took the life of actor Corey Monteith, and that story is next.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by Lifestyle Lift. Find out how you can light up your life.
The coroner's office in British Columbia confirmed today that Corey Monteith died of an overdose of heroin and alcohol. The star of the TV series Glee was found dead Saturday in a Vancouver hotel. He had recently gone through rehab. The coroner said the overdose was most likely an accident. Corey Monteith was 31. California regulators said today they want Pacific Gas and Electric to pay a record penalty for a deadly gas pipeline explosion back in 2010. The blast killed 8 people and wiped out 38 homes in San Bruno, just outside San Francisco. Under this plan, the company would pay $2.25 billion. $300 million of that would be a fine. The rest would go toward safety improvements. NASA aborted a harrowing spacewalk today when water started leaking into an astronaut's helmet with the potential to drown him. In zero gravity, the water was pooling around the eyes, nose, and mouth of Italian Luca Parmitano. It is not clear where the water came from, possibly the cooling system in his spacesuit. He got back inside the space station safely. There was a big surprise at Zoo Atlanta. The folks there knew that Loon Loon the panda was pregnant. They didn't know she was carrying twins. Here they are, born yesterday morning, the first set of panda twins born in the U.S. since 1987. Both of them appear to be healthy. They won't be named for 100 days, in keeping with a Chinese tradition. A summer camp gets kids off the streets and out of the line of fire. Their story is next. We began tonight with the oppressive temperatures, and we end with an oasis for kids who need to escape not just the long, hot summer, but the violence that often comes with it. Dean Reynolds found it in Chicago.
Every weekday when this rattle-trap van heads deep into a violent, crime-ridden Chicago neighborhood, Yolanda Morris is at the wheel.
Last summer, there were shootings right on this street.
On this street?
On this street, whereas we had to have our children actually lay on this sidewalk and just lay down until the shooting was over and then get them into the building.
She's talking about the children she drives to summer camp at the new Mount Calvary Baptist Church. About 140 kids, from toddlers to teenagers, can find a 6-hour haven here during what are historically Chicago's bloodiest months.
All they need is a chance in order to do something to get out of this neighborhood if they so wish to do so.
There are arts and crafts here to go with calisthenics, reading, as well as arithmetic.
How much is 30 plus 10?
Sometimes in the morning they'll actually play a game as we're driving, counting the number of abandoned houses. I mean, that's not something that you see, I believe, in most neighborhoods.
What kind of neighborhood it is was apparent when we retraced her route one day last week.
If you don't give them some tools and some encouragement, you know, when you hear something like that, I mean, you stop, you know, it's like, okay.
Yeah, what was that?
I hope it was a firecracker. I hope it was a firecracker. I mean, but you can't tell for sure.
Summer camp may mean gorgeous vistas and wide open spaces to other kids, but here it's a blacktop playground outside a church hall. A city park a block away is too dangerous to visit.
You mentioned some of these tragedies. I'm wondering if you ever go home at night and cry.
Sometimes I cry here. Sometimes I do, yeah.
Mrs. Morris, a retired bank executive who runs the camp, drives in every day from her home in the suburbs.
The children there don't need what the children in this neighborhood need. And so that's why I do it. I love the children.
Shootings in the Englewood neighborhood are down this year, as they are in the rest of the city.
So this year has been much better, and we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it'll remain kind of calm over here on the street.
After all, there's a lot riding on it. Dean Reynolds, CBS News, Chicago.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.